So hello everybody and welcome to this episode of CFO 4.0. So with me today is Becky Glover, who is a finance director. Weirdly enough, actually, I've seen Becky's name come up everywhere on LinkedIn, and we've crossed paths or almost crossed paths in so many different places, like the Digital Finance Awards, talking about the redefined CFO report. So it's actually wonderful to have her here with me today on the podcast. So welcome, Becky. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. And a nice little introduction that was. I'm everywhere.
Well, I don't think I've even done you justice. So tell us a little bit about your background and what you've been up to over the last few years.
Yeah. So, cool. It's been quite a busy few years, really. But yeah, to go sort of back to the beginning, if you like. So I left school at 17 and then went and did some AAT training in a small practice. So qualified with AAT in a small practice, then went into a larger practice and then I did my ACCA. So I've done everything from bookkeeping, payroll to bigger audits, the whole kind of big sort of picture of finance and accounting in practice. Then I qualified with ACCA and moved to a biotech company in Cambridge. From there, I then moved into a software technology company also in Cambridge called VNC Automotive, which is where I am now. I'm their finance director, and it was a spin-out company, so startup spin-out. And it's really exciting. So we basically put software into cars, really exciting software. So the kind of software where you can listen to your Spotify or use your Google Maps, it's all touch screen, etc. So it's a really exciting space to be in, and it's great to be doing finance, but in an exciting industry as well. And as you say, we've kind of been sort of close to each other, haven't we, but never quite crossing paths. Recently at the Digital Finance Awards, which I was really pleased to be shortlisted for, and had, as we were sort of saying previously, had a really fun night meeting everyone. And I've had so many great opportunities to do podcasts, to do speaking events. I think so next week, gosh, it's come around really quickly. I'm actually at the World Finance Forum, their CFO summit. It's really busy, but really, really exciting times, especially, I think, obviously everything's changing at the moment, isn't it? It's a bit of a scary world because everything's changing so fast. But especially in finance and business, it's all moving really, really quickly, and it's just a great place to be.
I think that's a really interesting observation. As we talk a lot about the challenges that speed creates, but like you said, it always creates some excitement and makes finance, in my personal opinion, a lot more interesting and not only more impactful, but also a more exciting place to work. Would you echo that?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's always, isn't there, when there's pressure, whether that pressure comes from a positive place or maybe negative place at the moment, pressure creates really good things. Yes, it's really hard and it's really stressful, and sometimes you just want to stay in bed and not face the world. But actually, by sort of pushing through that, and it will mean that some businesses have to pivot and they change things, and it forces them into different areas just to sort of stay alive. It actually means that businesses do progress and change and create something brilliant. And I think there's been, in previous recessions, previous hard times, there's numerous, occasions of where businesses were doing one thing, they were forced to then do something else, and actually then came out stronger and better for it. Obviously, that's not the case for everyone, unfortunately, but there definitely are positives we can take from this.
Yeah, and I think there is. I had a really interesting podcast with Ian, who manages or actually started the quarterly CFO survey at Deloitte, and he said something similar along the lines of, we do tend to look quite negatively on change and where things are volatile, but actually it's never as bad as we think it's potentially going to be, or unlikely to be as bad, I think was his terminology. I'm not going to put him on the spot too much. But actually there are silver linings that come out of some of these changes that we can take the most of. So what silver linings have you sort of seen over the last few years? Is there anything that you pick up and you think, actually, that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't put under that kind of pressure?
Oh, so much. I mean, day-to-day things, you force yourself out of your comfort zone, don't you? And I think working for a smaller business, so we don't have legal teams, we don't have tax departments, there's no sort of specialist areas for certain things. And just recently we did a office move. So everything from lease negotiations to packing up boxes and moving into another office, is all down to the people that are there, the people that are willing to roll up their sleeves. But so I think in my role where I am at the moment and sort of the size of the business, I've gotten involved in so much different stuff. And I think that's what some people are a little bit scared of joining maybe a startup or a smaller business, is that they think, oh my gosh, but I don't have all of these big teams to fall back onto, and what if I don't know that tax question or whatever it might be. But actually, when you have that sort of pressure in front of you and you're the person that needs to go and find out and needs to go and do it, you learn so much more. And yes, it can be a bit stressful, but actually you're gaining so much knowledge and confidence from those scenarios that it's brilliant. And as I say, we've just done, I think it was about 3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago now, we just did an office move, which I have never done anything to do with office facilities or anything before. But coordinating an office move and finding new space was certainly something that was really, really eye-opening for me. I'd never get that exposure somewhere else. So really, really interesting.
And how do you, because it's a very true piece that when you're in a smaller business, you kind of have to wear lots of hats. So how do you manage those hats? Do you work with external specialists? Are you very much, I'm going to figure it out myself? What's your approach?
I've got a really great network. So I'm definitely a believer in, your network being there for you, and obviously you being there for your network. So I do lots of, events and I go out. I love meeting new people, which I think a lot of accountants and finance professionals, perhaps their comfort zone is sort of staying within their box and doing what they know, what they're trained to do. But I'm actually fascinated by the people behind the businesses and the departments and things. So I love going out meeting people. So I'm lucky that I've got a good network of people to sort of go to and say, oh, at that last event, you said you'd done this, that, and that. Tell me, how did you do it? And, really want to learn from other people. But also, I'm definitely not scared of sort of holding my hands up and saying, do you know what? I don't have any experience in this, but if you want me to, I'll run with it. I'll get it done. Then you learn from it, don't you? And then next time you can go, oh, actually, I've done that before. Let's do that again. And you'll just continue to learn from it. So I think there's this sort of fear of failure around a lot of things that we really need to try and put to just get over it, really. There's nothing sort of academic around it, I don't think. It's just pushing through and just having a go. And I think once you've done that 1 or 2 times and seen that the world hasn't sort of fallen down around you, it makes you more confident to just try again, whatever that new thing might be.
Yeah, I remember because I recently over the last couple of years, I did some studies around sort of, I find the psychology behind why people do things really fascinating.
Yeah.
And that we do have an embedded fear of failure. And if you think about, how you learn, a lot of the time you learn by doing something wrong and then figuring out that isn't the right way to do it.
Yeah.
And certainly as a child. And at some point between the ages, normally of around about 5 through to 15, we lose that a bit, that willingness to fail and to figure stuff out, to fall off the monkey bars and figure out, maybe if I hold on a bit longer, I won't do that.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? I don't know like where that comes from. It must be something in all of us that shifts, because as you say, like, children are great at failing. Like, if we weren't, none of us would learn how to walk or talk, or all of those times where we've gotten a word wrong or fallen over, or whatever it is. But then you get to of an age an older age, and somehow it falls away. And I think maybe British people are particularly bad at it as well, because they always want to seem a bit more in control and calm, and like they've got this. And actually, if you fail, maybe that shows that you haven't quite got control, and that you are kind of winging it. But I don't know where that comes from. It's fascinating. I'm like you. I think it is really, really interesting to see and understand, like, why are we like this? Why are we afraid?
Yeah, well, absolutely, because obviously, a lot of what I do is obviously transformation, and I do find it really interesting that I can go into same industry with a similar sized business with a similar range of skills, right, and have a completely different experience in terms of implementation. And so that's what drove me, actually, weirdly enough, to start the podcast, was that whole conversation about there's something more than just the process that you go through, the technology you use to drive change within a business. It's all about the individuals involved and how they perceive you and the technology that you work with. I find so fascinating. And I'm not so sure it's British, right? I think there is something about finance, right? I do think in finance, because let's be honest, you get a number wrong on your P&L, if your balance sheet doesn't balance, all hell breaks loose. Yeah. If you think about the process that you're taught as you go through, you're audited, you're checked, you're triple checked. Somebody else signs something off and puts it in a file and stamps it, right? We've gone that far with finance. But there is something, like you say, about finance being able to innovate, because that's and to learn. So how do you create that culture within within your team? Is there anything that you feel like you do differently to encourage failure? I can't believe I've just asked you that question. How do you encourage failure?
Well, I think it comes from the top, doesn't it? So, and that's everyone. So every department, it will come from the department head, and then that department head, it will come from the CEO or whoever they're reporting to. So everyone has to look at someone else and go, am I safe to fail? Am I okay to give it a go? Or is someone going to shout at me or fire me? So I think it's having that sort of safe space and the control to kind of just have a go. So I think, I've been in lots of different businesses, and they worked all a little bit differently, and the culture was all a little bit different. But at the moment, I think we're all so friendly, and it's all very open and honest, that there's none of this, oh my God, I did it wrong, I need to quickly fix it or hide it, or there's nothing like that. It's very relaxed. Everyone has a sort of open and honest conversation with each other. So I think as well, being in a smaller business and having this kind of mentality around, you roll your sleeves up and you get stuff done. So you might not be a specialist in X, but you've got to give it a go anyway. There's always this kind of sort of like, it's almost like it's there in the back of your mind that you're not a specialist. So there might be an element of failure here. It's kind of just inevitable that, it might not be perfect. It might not just take you a quick 5 minutes because you've done it 100 times before. So I think it's really important that there is that safe space to explore things, to learn things, to have time to go away and learn as well. Because if you're in a time pressured environment, like maybe some practices are, because everything's sort of done on a timesheet on the clock. I know that's something that I felt personally when I was in practice, because you're filling in a timesheet for every 6 minutes or 10 minutes, depending on how it's recorded. you do feel like, oh, maybe I'm not quick enough. Maybe, I need to do this really quickly, really accurately, but I've never done it before. So it's that sort of balance. Whereas now in this small sort of business, small team, we all chip in, we all learn, we all sort of just go for it, and that's absolutely fine. So yeah, I think it's confidence and it's a safe space, but I really want my team and the people around me in a wider sense to feel safe, and to learn, because if they're not learning, what are they doing? We're all learning, and no one ever stops. So I think it's very dangerous if you think, oh, there we go, I'm done, I've learned it all, to then move forward. So there's always got to be a level of failure in everything that you do.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting concept, because failure is never, it's even just saying the word, it doesn't give you a positive feeling when you say it, does it? It doesn't. Yeah. So, and I guess there's that balance, isn't it? By almost not seeing it as a failure in itself. It's that whole, this is an opportunity to learn and develop, versus I failed.
Yeah, it's like reframing it, isn't it?
I like that. Nice.
Yeah. I'm not failing, I'm learning.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, and that there are always pros and cons to the whole what size of organization that you want to work with, and I found it really interesting. Obviously, speaking to on this podcast, I speak to lots of people at different size organizations, and like you say, there is a different culture in those smaller organizations. Don't get me wrong, like you say, you have to wear more hats, but there's a whole different feeling.
Yeah.
And what you get involved in, which gives you opportunities, but there's always a downside to a good side, isn't there?
Absolutely, yeah. And I hope that actually more people move around different size organizations, because I think there's a lot that we can learn from each other. Big listed versus small startup. Actually, if those people were free to kind of move around the different size organizations, then there's a lot that would be learned. But I know a lot of people would like to stay sort of in big listed or stay in small startup. But I think there should be that sort of open and willingness to move around.
Do you feel it's people not willing to move around, or that they get typecast into a particular sort of organisation and sort of role?
Yeah, I think it's probably the people interviewing, or maybe not even at the interview stage. Maybe it starts way back with sort of the recruitment agencies thinking, oh, they've done a few startup roles, let's find them another startup role, without thinking, oh, they've done some startup roles, they'd be, maybe really be innovative and can do great things for this larger organization. So yeah, I think people tend to, not always, but tend to recruit people that are comfortable and sort of like them in a lot of ways. So if they're from sort of big listed, recruiting someone in from startup might just not quite sit as easily. So I think it's at all levels, really. But yeah, it's an interesting one, because it is a big change, and who needs to adapt? I think it's everyone a little bit.
I like your comment though about an observation that people tend to recruit people from, I would say not necessarily like them necessarily, but from a similar background. I feel like they're trying to create a recipe for success. And I had a really interesting conversation with Rajesh from Oak North Bank. So they're also a fast growing startup in the financial services sector. And he actively looks for diversity of backgrounds, which I found, I was like, that's such an important aspect. And I am hearing it more and more in terms of the conversations that I'm having with certainly those that are at the heads of sort of fast growing teams, that they are actively looking for that balance. And is that something that you look for when you're looking for your individuals in your team?
Yeah, I think it was a few years ago, actually. I sort of read and was listening to lots of different things. And one of the things that kept coming up was about how we have this sort of bias in us, which we don't necessarily understand or know is there. But as I say, it's just like a comfort thing. You just naturally feel better around people that are like you or from similar backgrounds, or even, as wide as just similar ways of talking, like sort of similar accents. So I've always been quite careful to sort of understand and try and think about it, make it more of a conscious thing. But I think it's really important that we need lots of different people in teams, because otherwise you're never going to get a well-rounded team. So there's a book, I don't know if you've read it or seen it, but it's called Surrounded by Idiots. It's a great book.
What a title.
Yeah.
You've sold it to me already,
yeah.
quite frankly.
It's about different colours, so different personalities of people. So there's the 4 colours, and basically they're saying that not every team can be full of one colour, because then you might have all leaders. Well, one team can't have all leaders, because you're never going to get anything really done. There's not going to be any doers in that team. So fascinating book, highly recommend it. Really easy to read as well, it's quite funny. So I've always been quite conscious of it. So I hope that it stays sort of with me and part of my sort of thinking of things, because I think it's very important, and hopefully other people will start to think about it too in their recruitment.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. And I think diversity is always a conversation now in recruitment.
Yeah.
But I think the definition of diversity is becoming a lot more expanded. So coming away from the traditional, what I would call the traditional definitions of diversity, which is gender, which is obviously skin color, religious background, all those kind of things, into like more about educational backgrounds, work experience, industries, which I think is only a positive change. I think it does all some good to work with individuals that aren't like ourselves, that bring something different to the table.
Absolutely. And I think the more people that know about it and think about it, the better, because as we sort of said earlier, recruitment and even promotions, in-house stuff, has to go through certain stages. So even if HR are really aware of it and they're sort of pulling out CVs that are diverse and things, then the next stage it can be lost. So everyone at every stage needs to know, and to think about it for it to actually make a difference.
Absolutely. And I think and we talked about silver linings. I think that should be the title of this podcast. If you're listening to this now, this will be the title of the podcast probably. But one of the silver linings I find with this, the current talent shortage, is that people are having to look outside their normal recruiting grounds. They're having to think differently to give more opportunities to those that are maybe coming back into the workforce that haven't got their traditional background that they would ask. Which I think is great, because I think even one of the big 4 had lowered their their entry standards from a 2.1 to a 2.2. God forbid somebody should go in with a 2.2 degree. But it's about like finding the silver lining in a challenging circumstance.
And it's so refreshing when I see articles and read interviews and things with people that are saying, that there's differences of, who they're going to open the door to, in effect, isn't it? Because as someone who didn't even leave school with A-levels, I've no doubt had my CV not pulled out of the pile because I didn't have A-levels, didn't have a degree. But you just think if you can get a few paces along and prove yourself, it's so much easier. But I'm a massive believer in what the AAT are doing with apprenticeships, because actually I think that's a great way of getting people in the door, potentially earlier or younger. But I don't think everything comes down to your degree or your academic background. I think it has to be about what you can actually achieve in a role, kind of prove yourself.
And I think your comment about the need for I don't even know that it's better, but the prestige that sits behind a degree versus some of the more vocational qualifications is a real issue in my personal opinion, because I see, if I had the choice between someone that's done 4 years of AAT and worked in a workplace, come out of that, versus a graduate, they will be on opposite ends of the scale in terms of their skill sets, even though, one is very much academic. And I think it's a real shame that more graduates or people that have gone to get a degree haven't even considered the more, some of the qualifications route versus traditional degree route.
Yeah, I think it's a shame as well, because a lot of people, for whatever reason, university isn't for them, and perhaps they kind of think they have to go move away from their family and not enjoy those 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is. They could be, staying at home where they're more comfortable and maybe where they're needed the most, and actually learn and earn at the same time, especially when there's such a pressure on young people to move out, buy a house and, do all of these things by the time they're, 30. And actually they've spent quite a chunk of that in university and not earning a lot of money.
And I think that is as much driven by the teachers, the guidance counselors, the piece, because I don't know about you, but when I was at school, it was the dream was for everybody was university.
Yeah, and it was just like the thing, wasn't it? You didn't even really think about it. You didn't even question it, because your teachers said the right path was A-levels, then you went to university, then you came out and your world was your oyster, and
and you're gonna walk into a brilliant job,
be easy, everyone will want you, you can get 4 job offers in a day, and actually the reality isn't that at all. And I was talking to my friend about this the other day, and when you're that age, your teachers are everything. You believe what they're saying, even if you go home and say to your parents, this is what I'm going to do, and they say, well, you could consider X, Y, Z. Oh, what do they know? They're not my teachers, they don't know anything about it. So yeah, we've got a lot to change. And as you say, definitely teachers and school, career counsellors are one of them. But I hear all these horror stories of, people going into their careers office and them saying, oh, you'll never get to that, lower your expectations or do something else that's realistic. It's just horrendous, isn't it? But yeah, there's so much that needs changing.
Yes. Well, and there is a danger that we want to try and change the world as we go through this and that, but I think there's always something that we can do, whether that's, contributing and speaking to school students, whether it's, thinking about how we recruit and what we do. We've had some absolutely amazing apprentices come up through. They've been with us for 4 or 5 years. They're going through their AAT. Yeah. And actually the knowledge that they have coming in is just incredible. Yeah. Once they get through that. Yeah. So yeah, I believe there's some great qualifications for those that, like you say, aren't necessarily interested in the cost or the university lifestyle, though. I think that's what attracts quite a few of those graduates through. So we've talked about an awful lot, right? I don't quite know how we got to setting the world of education to rights and careers.
The broken school system.
But I wanted to go back to a comment that go back to one of the things to talk about earlier, which was very much about the power of network, because I think that's something in finance I don't see as much of, is networking, relationship building. And I think that is a missed opportunity. And you obviously both enjoy it and do it a lot. So tell me why. What is the benefits that you really feel from it?
Well, I think actually I didn't do it until a few years ago. I was actually quite nervous to do it, because I did think, it's going to be a room of extremely serious business men, mostly, that were much better qualified than I was. And, they were super confident. I would just be standing in a corner and I wouldn't know anyone, and all of these sort of fears rolling around in my head. But actually, it just came to the point where I just forced myself to do it. And I think because I was invited sort of one-on-one, someone else said, oh, you are coming to this, aren't you? It made me feel like I couldn't say no. And so then I got to that point where I said, oh, yes, I'll come. And then all of those fears of, walking in on your own, having to talk to people and etc. just came flooding through. But actually I pushed through that, like we were kind of saying earlier, the sort of pressure and the stress, you've got to push through it. And it was nothing like what I thought. So it was very friendly, very open, lots of people to talk to. Actually, no one like wildly more qualified than I was. No one stood there and thought, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about or anything like that. And I think having that one good experience then pushed me on to go and meet more people, because I firmly believe that finance, obviously being an extremely important part of business, you need to understand the people behind the business, and who the customer are. They're also people, and your employees, they're people. You have so many of these stakeholders that are people. So you can't, as a finance leader, sort of sit behind a computer screen all day, every day, plugging numbers into a spreadsheet, getting some really lovely graphs out at the end and thinking my job is done. Because if you want to understand the business and you want to understand the finance, you have to understand people. And, especially now, how are people shopping? Well, they're not really, they're cutting out luxury items. They're maybe not going on holiday quite as much. And if we can understand all of that, the psychology behind all of these things, then you're going to be able to understand the business and the finance much better. So yeah, I now love going out and doing that sort of stuff, because I think it's fascinating talking to everyone and getting their points of view on things. And yeah, it's just kind of gone from there, really. Just, you meet all of these new people and they're all wonderful, and then you meet other people through them, and it's just a big sort of network of help and understanding. And just to hear people doing the same thing as you or going through the same stuff is equally as positive, because you know that you're not the only one. And being a finance leader sometimes can feel like you are the only one, and can get a little bit lonely maybe at times. So yeah, I love it, and I'll continue to do it and hopefully meet some more amazing people.
I think that's brilliant. And because there's been so many benefits you've mentioned just there, is that, like you say, it's that understanding of what makes things tick, that ability to feel like you're not alone, which as a leader is hard, isn't it? Because you're surrounded by your peer group at work, if you're lucky enough to have a good senior management team. But that doesn't mean that you can be as open and honest and talk about what's happening in your team as you might do to somebody that isn't in the business, as it were. So I think that's a great reason to go out and talk. And then we talked about the need to find those experts in certain areas, because there's normally somebody that knows about tax in the finance room, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
There's somebody that's been through something similar. So I think that's a really good shout out, and one of the unappreciated benefits of networking that I don't think we think about sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
So tell us a little bit about, so before we finish, I'd like to know about your award for the Gen CFO Digital Finance. Tell me a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah, so actually March, end of February, beginning of March this year, I was contacted by AAT, and they said, we've got, this sort of multiple part webinar series coming up, and it's all about digital decoded, so trying to break down any sort of myths, get people involved, and just really kind of get engagement going with the sort of digital side of finance. So I was a part of sort of a 3-part series, and it was for people in industry using or wanting to use technologies to help them out. So yeah, I did those 3 alongside some amazing people, Chris Argent being one of them, Jess being another, and some, various other guests and people from AAT. And it was just such an amazing event. We all got on really, really well. And actually from that, so I think then in sort of May time, I then got an email to say, you've been nominated, shortlisted for an award coming up at the Digital Finance Function Awards for your work with AAT and their Digital Decoded series, which just kind of blew my mind, if I'm honest. I was so happy. It was one of those days. It had been quite a hard day. I had a bit of a migraine, one of those. And then I got that email. I was like, oh, who is this? Read the email. And you're like, oh my God, you read it again. And it just made my day. So, then went to the Digital Finance Function Awards, which was in beautiful London, and just had the best day. So Jess and I were both up for the award. Neither of us won, unfortunately. But actually, we met some really great people there, who actually then I went on and did some more work with afterwards. So it's all of these things, isn't it? You go to different things, you meet new people, and actually the opportunities just keep on coming. So hopefully, maybe next year, I'll be up for an award again and I'll actually get it. But no, the actual sort of webinar series that AAT did win. So I'm kind of a winner.
Yes, you're a winner by association, most definitely.
Exactly.
And then that sort of, talking about the future and what you feel is the future of digital and finance, how do you see the next few years playing out, particularly when it comes to how finance is going to change?
Yeah, well, I think we're going to see a big change. I think it's already sort of gathering momentum, and now it's kind of being like this big ball of energy, and it's taking us all along on this amazing journey. So I think the finance function is going to become very digital. And that's not to say that people are going to start losing their jobs and, we're going to be sort of taken over. The function's going to be taken over by AI and, computer learning and things. I don't think that at all. I think it will be very important in finance, definitely. And I think that will change how we are in finance. So we're not going to be, sat there doing debits and credits potentially and posting journals or posting invoices and doing that sort of stuff. It's now going to move to using the data that we've got and that's been put into the system to make amazing strategic decisions, and using the AI to take away all of that sort of mundane tasks that people just used to think was, boring finance. That's now going to be made a lot easier for us. It's going to be taken away, it's automated, and we're going to be given all of this amazing time back to actually make decisions and to try and better forecast and better think about things. So yeah, I think it's going to be huge, but I think it's going to be amazing. I don't think people should be afraid of, what's going to happen. So yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting. And I think we all need to go on the journey, not try and sort of resist the journey.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really important. And you're 100% right. The initial fear is that jobs will be lost. And I think the jobs will change, but the jobs won't necessarily be lost, if that makes absolute sense. Yeah. So I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the types of roles. That there will be somebody, right, that really enjoys typing stuff into a spreadsheet. Let's be honest, there are those people out there.
Yeah.
And typing an invoice into a system and doing debits and credits. And but yeah, what do you feel is the skill set that those individuals need moving forwards? What are you looking for in your team when you were recruiting so that you have the right team in a few years?
I think it's flexibility, because things are going to be changing and we need to understand that that's okay. So we need to flex with that. But then it's also being confident enough to go out and find these sort of softwares, find these new ways of doing things. So if I was to recruit tomorrow, I would want someone to be flexible but confident to go and explore, sort of just having fun with it and going out, taking demos from people, trying to play with the softwares, seeing what people can do for us now. I think the worst thing you can do is try and sit back and go, oh, no, we don't need that. That's not for us. I think what we need to be doing is leaning into it and saying, come on then, show me what it can do. Show me how it can make my life easier. And then once we've got that sort of fun part out of the way, we can then go, right, so that's like so many hours of my time back. What can I now give back to my business to make it even better? So whether that's, strategic thinking, trying to build new sort of products, services, helping out in that side of things. It just opens the doors for loads of different things, I think.
And I love the way you paint a brilliant picture. I think this should be played to those that are looking to get into finance, because I think, like you said earlier, that typical view of what finance is, of debits and credits.
Oh, yes.
And, things have to balance. Like, let's be honest, I think we all start to panic when stuff doesn't balance.
Yeah.
But having that shift away into what I feel is a really exciting future for finance.
Definitely.
It's, for me, it's a really interesting career path now, probably more so than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. And actually, I've got the sort of reflection of the fact that my father was an accountant. He's retired now, but he hears what I'm saying about what I'm doing at work and new things that are coming up. And he's like, God, this is so far away from when I was in accounting and finance. And he goes back to the time where they had one computer for the whole office and everything was on paper. So, you'd write out your ledgers on paper, and if you could never rub it out. There's no, you had to journal it properly. And so when you think back, just to a generation ago of accountants, it's like the world has really changed. And I think now, if you add in obviously technology and things, where are we going to be like when it's my child being an accountant going, that's not what we do anymore. We've moved on now. I think it's going to be even bigger change. And I can't wait to see it, really. I think it's going to be great.
And you make a joke, right? But I kid you not, I remember going into a new client that I'd never worked with 8 years ago, right? And they were using, obviously, a piece of software. And I was asking them what their process is. I kid you not, she pulled out a manual cash book.
No.
And I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
I have not seen one of those before. And she showed me, and I was just blown away. Well, first I was blown away the fact that she was actually doing it on both manually on paper and on a system, which I found incredible. That's another story. But actually, when you think of how far we've come, and in not, which we're saying it's a decade, but the time lapse from how much finances change is just incredible. Yeah. It's such a shift.
Yeah. And I think it's just getting faster and faster and faster. So I think, the next 10 years is going to be even more change. But it's crazy, and I was reading a report the other day, actually. It said, I think it was Dell, who actually did the sort of research, but they were saying that 80% of the jobs that we'll have in 10 years' time don't even exist. People don't even really know about them now. So it's like, wow, we really need to be on the top of our game and, be up for these changes and really grab them with both hands, because if you don't, you will be left behind and you won't be making the most of what you can achieve. So it's eye-opening, isn't it?
It is fascinating. And one of the things I find most fascinating about that comment is the fact that we talk about the jobs don't exist. So, and it comes back to almost like where we started up with is our education and how we're training and developing our individuals, both in our team and in our schools, actually fit for purpose for the jobs we don't even know exist yet, which is just crazy, isn't it?
It's mind-blowing, isn't it, to think about?
Yeah. So with all of that existential thinking, right, I'm now going to draw it to a close, because I think you and I could potentially talk for a very long time on this topic. So I want to say a massive thank you, Becky, for joining me on the show today and for sharing your thoughts and views. And it's lovely to speak to somebody that is so passionate about not just finance, but where finance is going. It's wonderful for sharing those views with our audience. And so I will pop a copy of the Redefined CFO report, which has been researched by Sage, which I think is going to be the underlying bedrock of data and interesting stats. If you want to have a sneak peek at that, and I'll pop in the link to the World Finance Forum as well. So thank you so much, Becky. It was wonderful to speak to you.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing. And as you say, we could talk all day.
Absolutely. So I will take a pause now.
Yeah. Thank you so much.